Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to episode 64 of Stir Crazy, where we sit around, talk shit, and give analysis about news and politics happening in and around these United States and sometimes across the globe. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Today's episode is Get On Board or Get Out of the Way, guys. The movement is still very much going strong, and unfortunately, in many ways, like the pandemic, we're still very much in the beginning of it, right? But the pandemic is also helping to drive a lot of different things that we're seeing across our society right now. It's definitely amplifying the racial disparities when it comes to healthcare, and clearly unemployment in this economy is playing a huge role in everyone's life right now. So we're going to discuss not only unemployment, the economy, but we're going to talk about healthcare with over 40 million people now unemployed. The number one candidate, or Democratic candidate right now for president, Joe Biden, or the presumed candidate nominee for president, has doubled down on being against Medicare for all. How in the hell is that even possible? And also, we're going to talk about respectability politics, especially in this moment for the movement for Black Lives, how many in the old guard are still very much wagging their fingers at the younger generation, telling them to pull the pants up in a different way. We're going to discuss that as well. And we're going to focus on how organizers, especially young activists, are the ones driving the policy changes we are seeing coming from across the country on the local level. So listen, we have a full slate on deck today. Of course, we always want you to join in the conversation. Y'all are the best. Y'all keep it live in the chat and in the comments. And plus, we are streaming on Periscope. So if you're on Twitter, you can always hit us up with tweets, questions, comments, concerns. We want to hear them all, okay? So right now, I'd like to introduce our fantastic panel. We have some new faces on Stir Crazy joining us today. From the Young Democratic Socialists of America, we are joined with their national co-chair, Amelia Blair-Smith. We're also joined today, hey, Amelia, we're joined with the Michael Ratner Middle East Fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, Khury, Peterson-Smith, and twice in the same week, baby. We must be lucky or something. We are joined with the angry sociologist, Taure Brown, all the way from North Carolina. Hello, panel. Thank y'all so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So the first place I want to start is a combination of talking about what's going on with the economy and how that ties into healthcare. And obviously, healthcare is a huge issue, not only just a campaign issue, at least actually it's not even a campaign issue, because I think Donald Trump and Joe Biden probably are very much, if not on the same page, or definitely in the same chapter together with being opposed to Medicare for all. They have, different proposals that they have set forth, but nothing that really gets to the crux of the problem. And I saw this video floating on social media a couple days ago where Joe Biden had an interview with a disabled activist. Yeah. Okay. And so about we're basically Joe Biden doubled down on being opposed to Medicare for all. And I'm not really even sure how that is a stance that is even possible today, as we're looking at over 40 million people unemployed. We have 3 million positive coronavirus tests. Cases of coronavirus here in the U.S., also dealing with 130,000 people dead. Amelia, I want to start with you because I understand that Medicare for all is something that Democratic Socialists absolutely stand for. And to look at the presumptive Democratic nominee for president continually stand against it vociferously, vehemently. He keeps screaming at us how he is not about this. How is that even tenable in this moment?
It's not tenable. It's not tenable at all. And at DSA, there's definitely a lot of ideological differences among the members, but just the overall consensus is that we absolutely will not support Biden. We will not put any of our support behind Biden, not just because of this policy, but because of all of his other policies. A lot of people, young people especially, are suffering, and they have had it with these neoliberal politicians, and they aren't going to go out and vote, or if they vote, they aren't going to vote for Biden or Trump because of issues like this, where neither candidate has a satisfactory option for young people. Yeah, that's just sort of what I see in that organization, in DSA and in YDSA.
Khury, I wanted to kick it to you, because when we look at the levels of unemployment right now in this country, and we're going to get to the clip referring to the interview that I was talking about just a moment ago, but what Joe Biden says is that if people want to have a private healthcare plan, they should be able to have one. And he was asked directly about how does that jive when you have 40 million people out of work and no access to private healthcare, unless you want to consider that COBRA bullshit, which is anyone who has ever had to sign up for COBRA or been presented with a COBRA plan. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, who can afford this shit? So, I mean, my gosh, like, Khury, let me just get your take on that.
Yeah, when Biden talks about it and he's like, look, I think that people should have the right to have private insurance. He's talking about it like hypothetically, as though it's like an experiment, as though that's not the actual reality. Like, he's like, let's try this. And it's like, we are living this. It's a nightmare, and if ever there was a test, if people somehow weren't convinced of the need for universal health care, before 7 months ago, I mean, certainly the fact that the U.S. has the number one, mortality rate, and the number one in terms of mortalities and in terms of infections in the world for COVID, I don't know what more evidence we need. So I think it's pretty clear how out of step that policy is with reality. It's out of step with much of the world. This idea that is hypothetical, Medicare for all in the United States, is something that's actually in practice in much of the world. So it's past time that we actually just catch up to reality and make universal health care real.
Taure, before I come to you, we have the video ready. I want all of us to just take a look at it so we can see for ourselves what the presumptive Democratic nominee for president has to say about Medicare for all in the year COVID 2020. Let's go.
It's no secret that I support Medicare for all.
I don't.
And that I endorsed Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in the primary.
Both good people.
But you won the nomination, and I respect that, and I am fully committed to beating Donald Trump.
I know that.
Throughout the Democratic primary, you made clear your opposition to single-payer, Medicare for all, and you have won the nomination. But in recent months, 20 million Americans have lost their jobs and many have lost their health insurance with it. Democrats overwhelmingly support Medicare for all. And it's especially popular among young people. And even your friend, Barack Obama, said recently that it is a good idea.
Democrats aren't just running on good old ideas, they're running on good new ideas, like Medicare for all.
So my question is, do you see a future where health insurance is no longer tied to employment? Will America ever have a single-payer system where health care is guaranteed as a human right?
Health care guaranteed as a human right, but taking away the right to have a private plan if you want a private plan, I disagree with. There's three things that I propose that we can do, and we can do it quickly. I support a public option as well. We can get a public option passed, and we can get it passed quickly, number one. Number two, I propose spending almost $1 trillion to make sure that people can get a gold plan on Obamacare, subsidizing anyone who wants to get in with a gold plan. Number three, providing for the option to have home care paid for and elder care paid for, not as part of Medicare, as just a basic right. It's an absolute basic right. And so I believe we can do all the things you want to do and do them better, more quickly than with Medicare for all. But we have this.
Taure, first of all, that video courtesy of Now This. Taure, what in the hell is Joe Biden talking about when he says that we could probably get a public option passed pretty quickly? Is he smoking crack? Does he understand that there is a Republican-controlled Senate right now? The House, that's pretty much the toss-up. It may remain in Democratic-controlled hands, but really, does that even matter? I mean, if they were going to go for a public option, wouldn't it make more sense to do this under the Obama administration when maybe the political temperature was a little bit more favorable? But what is your take on what Joe Biden just said in that word salad right there?
Yeah, it's really how to lose an election 101. I mean, that's what it is. How to lose an election. And there you go. I mean, it's really about this old neoliberal order that is on its last leg and is dying. And Joe Biden is neoliberalism's corpse that they've rolled out the final time, trying to dress it up as nice as possible to think that it's going to defeat Donald Trump. And right now, I just don't see it happening. He's so out of touch with reality. I mean, just the political reality of electoral politics, he's out of touch. And it shows how thoroughly rooted this class of folks, this particular section of the ruling class, is lock in step with the healthcare industry. And I'm talking about pharmaceutical companies, private hospitals, all the people who benefit and exploit and get rich off of people being sick and not being able to afford adequate health care. So it's really about Joe Biden just living in an era that doesn't exist anymore. If he continues down this way, he's going to lose. He keeps trying to capitulate towards this moderate Republicans that they think are going to swing over to his side versus Donald Trump. And this is just not going to happen. More people actually who voted for Obama ended up voting for Trump than the whole kind of Jill Stein or whoever else they wanted to blame for losing the election last time. He's going to lose again if he continues doing the same old shit that he's doing right now.
Guys, what kind of kills me about, looking at this slow moving train wreck that is going to be the 2020 presidential election is that the fact that so many people are being impacted now, like their politics may have shifted because now they've lost their job and now they have lost their access to their employer provided health care. And Medicare for all right now seems to be such a potentially it's just a glaring solution, because when you think about 3 million people have now contracted COVID. Now, we know that most of those people are going to recover. I mean, as in not die, right? But those who perhaps get sick and do recover, they have lasting chronic conditions affecting some major organs. We're also seeing the potential treatment of remdesivir cost between $2,000 and $3,000 out of pocket. And not to mention, no one has said regarding the potential vaccine, which we know the United States has ordered, I think, 100 million doses of this vaccine when it's ready, hopefully at the end of the year or early next year. No one has said what that is going to cost and who is going to pay for it, whether or not people are going to pay for it out of pocket, whether or not the government is going to provide some sort of subsidy for it. I mean, people's medical costs are about to explode across this nation. And I can only talk about Democrats because we all know Republicans could truly give a shit. But Democrats are not coming forth with solutions here, Amelia. And it's almost like a tsunami of fuckery that we cannot get out of the way of because it's going to be more in our faces this fall and winter than it is even now.
Yes, and also what boggles my mind is Joe Biden talks about private health insurance like it's good, like anybody likes their private health insurance. Many young people, many members of YDSA are on their parents' insurance plans, but many people, including myself, I've had prescriptions that I just can't fill because the copays are too high, even with private insurance. And so, the right to have private insurance, it's just a right to pay a bunch of money that you don't have. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, can I jump in on this?
Yes.
Because I think like Medicare, I mean, first of all, two things. First of all, like Joe Biden, I think he doesn't know what the word right means because he's like, yeah, healthcare is a right, so let's pay for it. It's like, that's not what a right is. Rights aren't something that you buy. Right is something that is guaranteed. So the second thing is, honestly, like single payer healthcare, Medicare for all, that's the floor. If we're talking about what needs to happen with public health care in this country. What this COVID crisis has revealed is that there is no healthcare system in the United States. What we have is a hodgepodge of like a few federal public health entities, like the CDC and the NIH, the US Public Health Service, and then private health entities, and then local and county public health, departments. And it's not working. It's not just that they weren't prepared in January, they fail every day. Kim, you just talked about the vaccine. So the same non-system that failed at testing is going to administer the vaccine. So there needs a complete overhaul. Guaranteeing healthcare for all is just one thing that needs to happen. But actually, we actually need a public health system in the US, and guaranteed healthcare is just one component of it.
Absolutely. Gang, I want us to move along, and I'm so glad that we have the people here joining us today that are already here, because you guys are very much in tune and in step with the youth, with the kids, right? I say this as a middle-aged person, like, yes, youth. Like, I'm telling you, I'm Gen X, and I'm looking at millennials and Gen Z like, yes, kick some motherfucking ass. I'm so proud of these kids out here in the streets, the youngins, the old ones. It's a beautiful sight. And some of the policy changes that we have seen, at least be proposed and hopefully later enacted, is all because of the thousands of people that have been in the streets for a sustained number of weeks now. And I kind of wanted to go around the horn, and you guys just fill me in about what have you seen from your corner of the world, and what has changed in the months since the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Khury, I want to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, what's one thing that's really cool is it just seems like different cities are raising the bar for other cities to aspire to. So in Minneapolis, they're like, what if we just don't have a police department? And we're like, okay, can we do that too? In LA, they won cutting the police budget by 5%. So in Boston, we tried to get it cut by 10%. So I think that's a really cool dynamic. In Seattle, they just seized part of the city. In New York, they've done that too now. So I like that dynamic of expanding horizons and rising expectations, which I think is the opposite of what it was before the uprising. I'll just say here in Boston, where I live, there's a bunch of different groups, primarily led by young folks, but there's one in particular called FTP, Boston, that's Free the People, Boston. And among other things, they have made a report card for all the city councilors to actually show where the city councilors stand when it comes to militarization and policing. And they not only are making that available online, but they're week pasting it around the city. So there's really cool creative things like that. But at the end of the day, what is driving the situation is rebellion. It's marches and it's militant, confrontation, which frankly is winning. That's how we've gotten to where we are. Now we're having conversations about abolition and defunding.
Amazing, right? And trust me, for the old people out there, we didn't think we was going to see this. We was just glad when marijuana got made illegal like 5-6 years ago. Like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. But no, I think what we're seeing now is a realization of imagination, right? People have been putting out these policy solutions, these proposals for a long, long time. And I think we just lacked collectively as a society, even, in your individual ethnic groups or whatever, just an inability to envision it. But I think that, younger people have been able to envision it, and now they're pushing it forward. Amelia, you said that you were in Minnesota, and you were there in the early days in Minneapolis in late May, early June. Tell us about what you saw and what has transpired, because Minneapolis has put the foot on the gas 100% in this movement.
Yeah, I mean, it was really beautiful. Just what I saw. The first night I came up was Wednesday, and there was just a massive, massive protest at the 3rd precinct. Just so many people, people from Southeast Minneapolis, from that, mostly Black community, but then also allies from outside that were coming in. The night after that, Thursday, that was the night that the precinct actually got taken and burned down. And I was there from early on in the afternoon, all the way into the night. And I remember just being there, seeing, the white allies kind of leave, and then that, black working class energy kind of stay there and hold it down. I was getting, rubber bullets shot at me. My friend got hit, like got a concussion. Just like that experience, I think is so important for young people to have, to actually say, this is something worth fighting for, and I'm going to risk my physical safety to stand up for what's right. A lot of times people are just in this like online, posting kind of atmosphere where there are hardly any consequences. But that's not where change happens. Waiting for like taking a break, waiting for the police to make their next move. And people would be saying like, oh, they've burnt down Target, they're burning down the AutoZone. When are we going to burn down the police station? They aren't, why are we not getting into the police station? And then a couple hours later, we got into it because people were demanding it and demanding it and demanding it. And that organic energy was there. And that's how it was kind of for the next couple of nights. There wasn't as much energy as there was on that Thursday night. But, that and just being there and experiencing that, I think it was very important for me. And attending similar events, similar protests, similar actions is so important for young people, to just see what is possible and to understand the consequences of what we're fighting for and the sacrifices we have to make to fight for it.
Taure, are you down in the triangle? Is that what they call it?
Yeah, I'm mixed around the triangle, Raleigh, Durham, that kind of area like that. Even though I'm originally from the 252, which is Eastern North Carolina, rural country folk. But yeah, I've been really kind of reflecting how this moment, I guess I'm part of the older of the younger generation now, being in going on my mid 30s, and trying to look back and reflect on, okay, where were we in 2014? And where are we now, and how is it different? And I saw somebody write on Twitter, and I'm sorry because I can't remember who it was that wrote the tweet, but they said, in 2014 we were saying fuck the police, and then in 2020 we're now saying abolish the police. And I think that shows like a real kind of transition between we were just angry and pissed off and wanted shit to change, but a lot of us didn't really have the knowledge or the understanding of, whoa, how do we create this change, or what does that change look like? We really just wanted to express this anger and wanted some kind of change. And I think in 2020, we've now articulated something that's more specific, and people are really grasping towards the idea that change can happen. And I convinced my mama, talking to my mama, that, we don't need the police in order to live in a safe and free society. And when I did that, I was like, oh yeah, definitely. There's definitely a change in consciousness going around. And I think it really kind of attributes to what Kwame Ture used to say, that when we have worsening conditions and rising consciousness, you're bound for a revolutionary situation. And that's what we've been having since 2014. Conditions haven't got better. They've actually gotten worse. We've had more material. And I mean, anybody can admit that now. But when I used to say it in 2014, especially at the height of Obama, and folks felt like they had some kind of rebound from the recession, it didn't feel like that. But now we can see things have gotten worse, and people are having more access to information. Their consciousness is raising, and this is what's really pushing this massive amount of change that we're seeing and will continue to see in the months and years coming.
You bring up an interesting point when you talk about, bringing your mama to the awakening of that we don't really need police at all. And, respectability is still hanging on, right? And I understand that for older Black Americans in particular, respectability was a means of survival, right? You had to look, dress, speak in order to make your way into a work sector or a corporate sector in order to try to advance and provide better life opportunities for you and your family. I completely understand that. But the talk about Black on Black violence, especially coming from Black politicians, has been pretty loud the past couple of weeks, especially in and around the holiday, July 4th. There was number of shootings across the country, and especially in big cities like Chicago, like in Atlanta, where children were killed. And I certainly don't diminish that or dismiss that at all. Unfortunately, this is the type of thing that we see happen in this country every single year. This is not new nor unusual, and unfortunately, we are very much desensitized to it. But at the same time, there was this big backlash, pushback from the Black political class, finger wagging towards the Black community about why are we killing our own? Why are we still engaging in Black on Black violence? And the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, had that exact sentiment following the death of the shooting death of an 8-year-old girl in Atlanta. Let's take a listen to that clip.
We've talked a lot about what we are demanding from our officers in our communities. We've protested, we've demonstrated, we've been angry, we've cried, we've demanded action. Well, now we're demanding action for Sequoia Turner and for all of the other people who were shot in Atlanta last night and over the past few weeks, because the reality is this: these aren't police officers shooting people on the streets of Atlanta. These are members of the community shooting each other. And in this case, it is the worst possible outcome. And there were 2 other people who were actually shot and killed last night and several others. Enough is enough.
Now, Taure, I'm going to kick this one back to you because I know you wanted to address Mayor Keisha Bottoms specifically, but I hate this framing that, we are killing each other. First of all, if you look at any city that has a so-called Black violence problem, you will also definitely see anti-violence movements against exactly what she's talking about. So for her to present it as, oh, well, y'all was protesting against the police, but I don't see y'all saying nothing about this, that's bullshit. Every single big Black city I know of has been pushing anti-violence for decades now. What do you have to say to Mayor Bottoms and those in that group that seem to think that the same people who are in the streets advocating for Black lives, somehow condone this behavior? I'm in confusion about what her point is.
Yeah, the cowards. Period. Cowards. I got involved in the movement or the struggle not because of a case of police brutality changed me. It was actually watching. In 2009, a young kid, 16 years old, out of Chicago, named Darion Albert. He was murdered in a kind of street fight in Chicago, and it was captured live on video. And watching the video really affected me because I came from a community, a small town that was about 70% Black, where we had a lot of problems with community or intraracial violence. And I wanted to know why. Like, why is this happening? Why are my friends getting killed? Why are we getting involved in this kind of petty bullshit? And like most folks, my initial reaction was to blame Black people. The reason why you do this, because we're an easy target. It's easy to say, oh, it's something wrong with y'all, so y'all need to fix the problem. But when you really take the time to try to study why these kind of things happen, and you're looking at why we have high levels of violence in certain communities, it coincides with the inequality that exists there. So that's really how I became a sociologist to begin with, because I was looking to figure out what was happening. Why this specific issue? Why is it going on? And when I looked at it, you can't talk about violence in the community and can't talk about healthcare. You can't talk about access to education. You can't talk about how the geography of the streets look. Atlanta has gone through significant gentrification, police brutality. We have the whole history of the Red Dogs, right? The jump out boys that used to get everybody on some bullshit, right? All of those things impact that violence, right? If there's an underground economy there where folks have already struggling amount of limited resources, have to tap into this economy where it's already, again, a competition, and you can't fight your conflicts out within the court system because you either A, don't have the money, or you're engaged in activity that they deem as criminal. Or how do you solve your conflicts? How do you solve your problems? So all of this, again, just places the blame on the people and not on the institutions. And of course, it's not going to say that because Keisha Bottoms represents those institutions, despite her saying we protested, we struggled against, as if she's not part of the very same beast that folks are struggling against. right? And this is how pernicious these black politicians are, because they almost make it seem like they're on the side of the people and not part of the exact system that they're sworn to defend and protect in the interest of those who benefit from that system. So they're cowards. It was white supremacist rhetoric at its finest, and it's cheap. And anytime you make an analysis of oppressed people and don't include their oppressor, you'll come to an incorrect analysis. And that's, word to Kwame Taure.
Khury, like the issue of so-called black on black violence, that's really the only time you hear terms presented that way. We don't hear white on white violence or Latino on Latino violence or Asian on Asian violence. Like, it's only framed as black people are the ones out here killing each other, and for it to be reinforced by the black political class. I get so upset sometimes when I think about how much Barack Obama as president, really shamed black people and really talked very condescendingly towards black Americans, his fucking base, right? He would talk to them in this very, patriarchal, now y'all know better, now y'all know. And the people that have come after him are staying and sticking with that same script and with that same rhetoric.
Right. And so so I'm with you. Like, it's offensive to hear that actually from, particularly out of the words of black politicians, but it also is not working. It's not effective. What Keisha Bottoms said is not new. Like, of course, it's tragic to lose this 8-year-old girl and all the people that we lose to street violence. But I've heard this conversation before. We're killing ourselves. When are we going to stop? What is newer, or what is renewed, is the conversation that we've had in the past several weeks, which has reframed an understanding of race and racism in this country, where we're talking about, yes, racist police violence, but as the expression of something bigger and deeper and historical. A country where there are monuments to the people who fought to enslave us, and bringing them down is somehow controversial. That is not a society that values Black life. A society where Black communities, the people excluded from the economy, that's not only right now, that is a permanent feature of Black America. It is a chronic feature of Black America. This is what we need to be talking about. A country where guns are more abundant than our human needs. So that framing that has become popular in the past several weeks, let's apply that to understand street violence. And that's something that, it sounds like Mayor Bottoms doesn't want to do. They want to return to the conversation that we were having before the uprising in Minneapolis. What I'm saying, I think what we're saying is what people in this country are learning right now about not only how deep anti-Black racism is, but how powerful Black struggle and Black-led struggle is. Let's take that and reframe everything, including a question of street violence. And they don't want to have that conversation, because not only does that get to exercising the demons of racism in this country, but it gets to redistributing the wealth. Actually, at the end of the day, that's actually what's about. It's about stopping gentrification, stopping these evictions that are happening. It's about rethinking and remaking the U.S. economy. It's about reparations. Once we talk about all those things, that's going to address things like violence. But that question of inequality is something that they don't want to address. That's why they don't talk about it in terms of inequality.
Ever. And Amelia, I don't expect you to comment about Black respectability, but at the same time, when these spates of violence occur, especially in big cities that have, majority Black population, Black and brown population, usually these politicians use that. They weaponize it politically as, see, this is why we need more money for police. See, this is why defunding the police is a bad idea, because how are we going to control all this violence? Well, as far as, everyone is concerned, police haven't been defunded a single penny yet, right? Some of these budget proposals that have passed some city councils around the country, these won't take effect immediately. It's definitely going to take, some time for money to be redistributed from the police and hopefully allocated to other places. But at the same time, the police don't stop violence currently at their current levels of funding. So, of course, funding them more is not going to diminish the issue of gun violence.
Exactly. And the whole system is what creates these problems in the first place that the police are in, and our criminal justice system, and how it doesn't rehabilitate people. It just makes the whole situation worse. And all these police, these Black and brown communities are the ones that are the most over policed. So it just shows how useless the police really are. So maybe if we actually gave communities, control and democracy over their own situation, over their own systems of justice, then maybe something would be better. If you took the money for the police and actually invested it so that people aren't in desperate situations where they have to turn to violence, that's just a no-brainer to me.
Guys, we have some comments, lots of comments from the comments. Let's check in here. Mark Johnstone says the sickness industry can't make money if people aren't sick. If you want to deprive them of their right to make money, or what? Yep, we're going to have a big problem this fall, guys. Paul X BSOG Kim 2020. Oh, you're cute, Paul. I can't run for Congress or any kind of office because I'm just going to cuss the whole time. I'm just going to get up at the podium and be like, me or this motherfucker, come on. Mikowa comment says, when your population isn't traumatized, you don't have the violence. That is an excellent, excellent point. Well, this last point I want to make about respectability, I want to show this video. And Dwayne, I think you can go ahead and run it because I don't think there's any sound to it. But today in New York City, Reverend Al Sharpton, civil rights leader, and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio took to the streets with their paint rollers and got to rolling. Black Lives Matter mural right there on Fifth Avenue. Let's we take a look here at, there we go, Reverend Al, my mom's favorite, my mom's #1 fan. She loves Reverend Al, as do most older Black people. Bill de Blasio says he got a Black wife and Black kids, so he's down for the brown. Not exactly, but what's interesting to me about these Black Lives Matter murals, as there's one in Washington, D.C., and then there's, several other ones have popped up. I'm not fully understanding the point of this. I mean, I understand symbolism and performance and this, all that, and the third, but I'm like, is this a home base? Like, if you're being chased or harassed by the police, can you just stop at Black Lives Matter Plaza and touch a light pole and be like, safe? Nope, police, you can't shoot me, can't kill me here. I don't think it's that easy. But Taure, what are your thoughts about these installations of Black Lives Matter as funded by local and city governments to show, I suppose, that these particular politicians stand with Black lives? But when you look at the records, certainly of Bill de Blasio and his relationship with NYPD and the things that he has allowed to happen, and same thing with Mayor Muriel Bowser in Washington, D.C., her relationship, very chummy with Metropolitan Police. When you see these photo ops, Taure, what comes to mind?
Symbolism decoupled from substance is pretty much cheap propaganda. And that's what it is. It's almost offensive, pretty much, because you can look at any part of any qualitative or quantitative expression of inequality in New York and see that Black lives don't matter there, or anywhere else across in this country, or pretty much anywhere else in the Western world. So that, it's just rude, disrespectful. I think, when I think about all these kind of monuments and symbols, I think about how the United States treats its own troops, who they send out on behalf of U.S. imperialism, right? That they come back and say, honor the troops. And they'll spend millions of dollars to construct some kind of monument for homeless veterans to sleep under, right? And that's the same kind of thing, right? It's this empty symbolism that it diverts people's attention away from what's the real kind of issue that's going on. So rather than saying okay, we're going to actually do some shit that will fundamentally change Black folks' lives, or, poor and working class folks' lives, no, that we're not going to do that. But we'll spend some money on some yellow paint and paint the street Black Lives Matter, where you can get your ass whooped on Black Lives Matter Avenue.
Plaza.
That's already happened in DC. It's already happened in DC, where Bowser made that Black Lives Matter Plaza. Less than 2 weeks after that, the police were running folks out of there shooting them with tear gas and all kinds of other shit, right? So that's why you have to be so careful with symbolism, because I mean, that's all Barack Obama's entire presidency was: symbolism for Black folks decoupled from substance. And that's why we materially were worse off and continue to get worse off during his administration, while folks were praising that, oh, look at him, he did his inauguration with MLK's Bible and silly shit like that, which is, I mean, just disrespectful to the legacy and the politics of Martin Luther King Jr. So I'm over it.
Amelia, are you seeing similar things happening in and around Minnesota, Minneapolis, where I mean, I know there's some amazing art actually being painted in terms of murals, like actual beautiful murals, but Black Lives Matter, renaming things after Black Lives Matter. What's happening where you are?
Yeah, well, and a lot of times it's a co-optation of what, real Black radicals on the ground are doing. For example, George Floyd Square, that was created by members of the community as a space of mourning. But now we've seen, people coming through, politicians, taking pictures and posting it on Instagram. And the police are really just waiting for the chance to come and bulldoze it down. So we've actually been having, nightly shifts. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go on a security shift one night to guard the square and try and keep it from being torn down. But I agree that it's just propaganda and trying to satisfy people with little wins so that we lose sight of what we're really fighting for.
Khury, I hope to participate in some of the weekend protests and the demonstrations that are happening in DC this weekend, but I hope I don't get my ass kicked on Black Lives Matter Plaza by the cops.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love art. Like, I love public art. That's great. What I don't love is when a public art installation is used to deflect a conversation about what actual justice looks like. So, I just think we can't lose the fact that what has actually brought us to this conversation about defunding the police and about police accountability has been the militant mass uprising. And I think that it's on us to really maintain that content, make sure that content remains, and we can't let them get away with it. You cannot. I mean, De Blasio. It's not acceptable that you simultaneously paint Black Lives Matter while you back the NYPD, driving into protesters and brutalizing protesters. Or, it's as though they've sort of, as though he hasn't been mayor since the murder of Eric Garner or the brutalization of countless other Black people on his watch, and the defunding of schools that serve Black families, Black and brown families, the making Black neighborhoods unlivable. Mayor de Blasio presides over that. All of these mayors preside over that. And so, these gestures, it's true that they're empty, it's true that they're symbolic, but they're actually meant to deflect from the reality of what they have done and what they continue to do. So I think it's really on us to remember the power that lies in the streets, when we fight, and that's what has brought us here.
Guys, I'm not sure if you have heard about this. It's called the Breathes Act. I saw this, I glanced at it briefly, unfortunately. It was a piece ran in the Star Tribune about this proposal. It's a legislative proposal that was crafted with Black Lives Matter and roughly 150 other organizations. I wanted to get to some of the finer points of it, because although it has not been formally introduced by any member of Congress, it does have some early support from lawmakers like Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, and a couple of others. So it's broken down into 4 sections, but specifically it talks about divesting federal resources from incarceration and policing. It talks about eliminating agencies like ICE. And I think all this is all well and good, but the issue when it comes to getting things passed federally is, clearly Congress is controlled by the Senate controls the Republicans control the Senate. We have a bunch of somewhat feckless Democratic electors controlling the House, and we have Donald Trump as president. So I think in gesture, to propose legislation like this that does address some of the systemic issues is good. It doesn't really stand a chance. Khury, I want to start with you. From a policy perspective, does it even make any sense to try to raise these types of changes legislatively at the federal level, or should we just start at the local town, county, city level, state level, and hopefully hope that it works its way up the chain?
That's a great question, and I think at every level we got to do this at every level, and that's actually one of the things that's brilliant about the Breathe Act is that when we talk about police funding, politicians at the federal level can wash their hands and say, "Oh, that's a local issue. That's not on me." And so the fact is that elected officials at every level and the government at every level needs to be accountable and responsive to what people are demanding. And it is the case, actually, that there's plenty of federal activity that does absolutely impact at the local level. Things that come down from the Department of Justice, things that come down from the Department of Homeland Security. So that should absolutely be ended. So I think that's really a worthwhile fight. But the other thing, I think there's something bigger to this, which is that this is part of reframing. It's part of that work of reframing how we understand racism in this society and what racial justice actually looks like. And my hope for the Breathe Act is that it can be in the same tradition as the DREAM Act. I mean, think about the DREAM Act and how that reframes undocumented migration in a way that is lasting, or the Green New Deal, which again, people say, oh, the Green New Deal doesn't have a chance, of actually being passed. I don't, we'll see. Maybe elements of it will be passed. Maybe the totality of the legislation at some point can be passed. But regardless, it has reframed how we understand climate and climate justice. And so I hope that the Breathe Act can do that same kind of thing when we talk about anti-Black racism and what Black freedom and what racial justice looks like.
Mm-hmm. Amelia, you were in the streets of Minneapolis in the early days of the uprising, and part of what the Breathe Act proposes is the elimination of the 1033 program, where local police agencies get surplus or use military equipment. The fuck you need a tank for in the middle of Minneapolis, or MRAP or LRAP or any of that other obnoxious nonsense. It also seeks to establish what they call the Neighborhood Demilitarized Program, which aims to collect and destroy all that militarized police equipment and get rid of it fully by the year 2022. Now, I don't see cops letting go of any of their military toys, not without a fight. But the fact that we saw so many military tactics deployed against American citizens who were exercising their constitutional and civil rights of freedom of assembly and demonstration and protest, but yet they were treated almost like they were enemy combatants by members of the law enforcement who were out there to protect and serve. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they were thrilled to do it. Just, seeing the cops driving around in armored vehicles in Minneapolis, the first or second night of curfew. It was really scary for me just to see everything shut down and patrolled like it was a war zone. But yeah, I think, and to speak a little bit about the legislative demands, I think it's probably going to be a lot more effective to fight for things on a local level. And that's what we're trying to train students and young people to do. There's been campaigns since, before these protests even popped off, of students trying to break their campus's ties to local police, trying to get funds directed towards campus police departments, directed towards students, just high school students trying to get their cops out of their schools, trying to get rid of student resource officers who are, just a recent thing of the past 20 or 30 years, having cops in schools. But now it's becoming more and more ubiquitous as a system to prop up the school to prison pipeline, and to prop up this increased militarization that ultimately leads to the prison industrial complex, which is needed to sustain American capitalism. So yeah, just fighting for these things on local levels. These are things that, young people can do. People, 15, 16 years old, I'm seeing, standing up and fighting for this, which is amazing to see. And even if we don't win it this time around, just staying in the fight, keeping steady pressure until the next moment comes.
Taure, when it comes to prison so-called reform, what the Breathe Act does propose is an end to all life sentences. It would abolish life sentences. It would also end all minimums, which we know has been instrumental in keeping so many people locked up for so long behind petty shit, right? I mean, the 3 strikes law passed in the 1994 crime bill, was so devastating to Black and brown communities. The prison system needs reform without question. And if this bill helps to address that, what are some of the other ways that we can go further to address the issue of mass incarceration, either from a federal or a state level, in your opinion?
We don't have mechanisms to address harm in our communities, but I do not believe that prisons serve that function in any way. Again, I think they're a tool of the capitalist system in order to kind of lock up people based on social problems that the system creates itself. I think when I is changing how people think and changing how people see these things, and I think that that's again really the power of this kind of legislation. So outside of legislation, what folks can do is continue to do what we've been doing, talking about these things, studying, being in the streets, organizing, burning shit down if necessary. Like that's what has to happen. Because what you have is a system in crisis. The capitalist system is in crisis. It cannot meet the needs of the people, and it is literally falling apart at the seams. So what we do now have at the time is an opportunity to put pressure on that system, because they're going to have to try to capitulate towards the people in order to try to preserve itself. Mindset when they were writing it, and I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Listen, gang, before we leave, I wanted all of you, each of you, to put on your futurist caps, right? Because I feel there's no doubt that 2020 is not unlike 1968, 1969, or 1944, or 1929, where these seismic societal shifts are happening. And us being in the moment right now, we don't know when this is going to end and what the end even looks like. But, compounded with COVID, everything's up in the air right now. Shit could go either way. It could go amazingly well, or it could go horribly bad, or we could get somewhere in the middle. And I just wanted to get y'all's take. Where do you see us? July 2021, where is this country going to be? Where is this movement going to be? Where are we health-wise going to be as it relates to the pandemic? Taure, I'm gonna start with you and go back through Amelia and then end with Khury.
Woo, that's a tough question. 2020 got all kinds of stuff for us. I mean, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, looking at it right now, it looks like Donald J. Trump is going to be the president for at least that year, or at least those few months after starting January, and probably for the next 3 to 4 years after that. Maybe, I don't know, depending on what something cataclysmic might happen. But right now, I see him winning the presidency. I see that folks putting more intense pressure on these kind of systems, and really, try to hold them accountable somewhat, quote unquote. I think really what we're going to see is just a rise in consciousness among people. I can't really predict the conditions, because the way shit goes, that could change all tomorrow. But I can predict that folks will continue to kind of recognize the basic contradictions, or the inherent contradictions that are associated with this society, which is a settler colonial society, an imperialist society. When folks start to recognize those contradictions and see and make sense and connect them to the current conditions that they're experiencing, I think that's what you're going to see, a heightened consciousness. I can't really talk about the conditions, but I definitely think more people will be aware then than they are right now.
Amelia, we've seen so much happen in such a short period of time. 1 year from now, where do you see things being?
Yeah, so the dissipation of the energy of the protests has, been a little bit discouraging for me personally. But I do see, it sort of felt like it came out of nowhere. So I do think that some, militant, Black led energy could and should, I hope it will emerge again and get people organized, get people mobilized. I think young people are going to be sick and tired of going back to schools that are opening up just to be death traps for the coronavirus. I think as the death toll rises, as the government keeps trying to push us out into these public spaces, I hope eventually people are going to say enough is enough, maybe with another inciting incident like the murder of George Floyd. So that's what I'm hoping on, and sort of what I'm expecting.
Khury, you get the last swing at this, honey. What are your thoughts about the next coming 12 months?
Well, first off, thank goodness for Black-led Uprising, because if you had asked this question 2 months ago, it would have been a sad answer. And now I'm feeling really hopeful about what's possible a year from now. And, we don't know exactly. I mean, we've already won a bunch of things in the past few weeks. But on a bigger level, I think that we're at a crossroads where we really get to make some big decisions. I've heard, growing up, socialism's not an American thing. That'll never work here. Now, it's a different conversation. The idea of universal health care, that happens somewhere else. It can't happen here. Now it's a different conversation. So I think that we're going to have some big conversations and have to make some big decisions. The one thing I want to end with is I hope that it extends beyond the borders of this country. Because if we're talking about a better society, that can't just be a conversation about what happens within the U.S.'s borders. And I'm so glad that you brought up, Kim, the fact that the BREATHE Act targets the 1033 program, which is this program where the Pentagon gives surplus weapons to local police departments. And it's what are surplus weapons? Think about that. This is a country that has surplus weapons, but does not have enough testing in the middle of a pandemic. Does not have enough healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. So not only do I think we need to just shift our understanding of this country, but as part of that, we need to demilitarize this country and demilitarize, therefore, what the U.S. does around the world and learn from people around the world, too. I hope that that's part of what we do over the next year, because people have already won universal health care in other countries. People have already won things that we're fighting for. So we have a lot to learn, and I hope that this is a year of learning and fighting and winning.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Khury Peterson-Smith. We've also been joined today with Amelia Blair-Smith and Taure Brown. Panel, you guys are fantastic. The newbies, I hope to have you guys on again. Taure, we see you in a couple weeks, but this is a great conversation. And Khury, by the way, the chat was giving your fro lots and lots of love, baby. So yes, dude, yes, keep all the froage flowing. It's gorgeous.
Appreciate it. It is hot though.
Oh, I bet it is hot. Trust me. I know.
Get my Taure on.
Guys, tonight, don't forget, everyone that's watching, it is the premiere of the newest episode of the Police Accountability Report with Taya Graham and Stephen Janis. Listen, if you have not ever checked out PAR, you really, really need to do so. They do a fantastic investigative deep dive into the issue of police corruption, police brutality, and what the solutions are surrounding it. So don't forget, 9:00 tonight, Police Accountability Report. Also tomorrow, we have First Nation Fridays. You know what it is, where we have Jen Deerenwater, Desiree Kane, and Johnny J. There has been so much news happening around Indian country. Shout out to all the Native Americans out there this week, because y'all have had a huge fucking week. And I cannot wait to break it down with our panel of Native American ladies. So that is tomorrow, First Nation Friday, although we will be going on an hour later because of an earlier scheduled program. So tune in Friday, 6 p.m. Stir Crazy, First Nation Fridays. I hope to see you guys there. I'm Kim Brown. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have anything you want to say to us, you can always email us at stircrazy@therealnews.com. Guys, I am reading your emails. I'm sorry I'm slow in the replies, but I smoke a lot of weed, so sometimes it takes me a while to get my thoughts together. So bear with me. I will reply to all your emails, so I appreciate it. You guys have a great, fantastic rest of your evening. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.